All right, welcome everyone at the next multi-network community sync. Today we have October 16th, 3 weeks to next KubeCon in US, but today we're just gonna focus on multi-networking most of the time. So I have one topic to go about is to kind of drill into what we really want to do and how we want to integrate with the DRA. Um, with based on what Lionel did, and then based on what we did for the last 2 years with our kind of cap draft that we had written last year. So right now, I would like to kind of go into the details of what we envision of how would that look like, right? I don't have anything, so I'm planning just to kind of on the fly ad hoc drew something and write something, and we can discuss. Any other topics that we not want to tackle? Anything quicker to talk before we're gonna kick off in this one? Because I assume this is gonna take us probably the whole hour. Uh, Anything? Anyone?
Just the cap about the resource claim status has been merged. It's in
Oh
alpha
yeah,
for now.
congrats, Lionel.
Yeah. And thanks for the support and reviews all. And this is in behind a feature gate for now. And
Sure. Oh, the whole even
yeah.
the status right part, is that what it is?
Yes, exactly. And I feel that the pod status is not closed, so we could continue discussion, I guess, with SIG Network to see maybe if this is possible or not. Because
What make you say that?
I mean, I think it was Shane who added this comment on the cap. I think it
Mm,
was the last comment, but there's alternatives, and it would be good to explore them more into
mm,
details. So if we have good arguments, or if we prove that this resource claim status would not work, for example,
mm.
endpoint slash controller, maybe we could go through that path. But let's see.
Okay.
I think it's because it's in alpha for now. It's better to do it now than if it reach beta at some point.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Anything else? Anyone? All right. So let's jump to the DRA stuff, and I think I'm gonna draw it kind of right here. So I think before we gonna jump to things, I want to kind of remind, maybe people might not aware, but let me remind on what did we ended up on having. Let me just quickly just copy paste the pod network resource and some examples. So our general idea was to have this guy that was uh, how to call it, initial idea pod network, right? So that was what we wanted to have. Let me just do that. So that was the thing that we wanted to have initially, right? To have a pod network. It's supposed to be the central point of the whole thing, right? They're supposed to be referencing the pod, and then anything wanted to be multi-network applicable or compliant would then reference to which network you want to do your stuff, right? Whether it's service, network policy, etc., right? Uh, so we needed a handle. That's what we always kind of driving towards, to have a handle to do something. So uh, the object, by the way, is there's not much to it, right? I think what we had, maybe I'm passing the more the least complex thing. I think I would paste this more because I missed a field. What's important is this parameter as well. So what the object had was just a field for enabled, a provider, so that we can identify who's owning the specific pod network. And this was in line of ingress provider. I'm not sure how you're familiar with that, but just to kind of ensure who is, which controller is supposed to manage this pod network. And then the most important, a reference to some other third-party object where our implementations will come in, right? So whether it's a Multus or I don't know, Cilium implementations or Calico, whatever it would be, then they will kind of, if they want to parameterize the feature even further, they have the ability to do it through this, right? So that was the kind of the gist, high level of what is. Now we have enter the array, right? And this is where Lionel, I gonna need your help here a bit. Let me maybe draw. Let me just leave that so that I have that for next thing. So for the array, what did we had? Can you paste maybe an example of a claim there, Lionel? Do you have one that we can paste in what it would look like?
Yes, give me a second.
Thank you.
I paste the link or
Yeah,
this
no,
is
I'll
the
just
link.
yeah. Oh, do you have a link? Just maybe resource claim. You have a status. Okay, so because this is a resource claim, has a status. Yeah, that's. I think that we want to without maybe for now the status. That's gonna be
Okay,
the
you
next
click on
stage.
object applied.
Right, right. So let me leave the link there. It's good, but this is the claim today, right? And what do we have? We have devices and basically parameters, right? What you did is just put the content of NDA of network attachment definitions, right? That's it, right? This one. Is that correct?
Yes, this is the CNI config, and you also have the interface. So everything under parameter is this opaque parameter, is
Right.
the opaque field. Yeah,
So this
exactly.
is how this requests. What does the request means? What this one does mean?
So you request a device,
Mm-hmm.
um, and based on what you requested, the DRA driver should provide you a device based on this configuration that you provided above.
Mm-hmm. And that is all kind of implementation specific. Is that correct? Because I assume because your Mac VLAN ETH0 kind of points to here, but this is opaque, so this is kind of independent, right? Or is the request? No, the request is part of a standard. It's not standard of the opaque piece, right? Yeah. If I see online, yeah, exactly. You see what I'm saying, right? Because like I'm
So
looking here at this like for the volumes and mounts in pod, right? You define your volumes, and then you in mounts you say, okay, I want those volumes in this specific container. This is not like that, right? Or this is something that requests.
uh, I'm not sure if I got the question. Sorry.
Mm. What does the Mac VLAN ETH0 refer to? Maybe that will be here. Is it referring to this name? Is that what it is?
No, it. Let me try to find another because Antonio also had, I think, better example because it's also related to the scheduling. So
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Oh, okay. Because now we need to define on what I'm getting with this. I would like to define basically how would that look like? What will be the opaque piece, right? So the parameters, is that a field that's opaque, Lionel, or the whole opaque? Is all this a opaque? What we need to define?
no, no parameters.
Only and the parameters is already standardized from DRA. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so whatever is in parameters, this is what we need to define what this would look like, right? That's the kind of the structure we want to kind of use here. That's one aspect. And then I think the other aspect would be, do we define any standardization around how we use the rest of the DRA object, right, of the claim? You can see there is a bunch of, unless there is only one way to do that, and this is Lionel, when you maybe can step in and tell us. But I think definitely we need to define what the parameter is going to look like, right? What is the structure of this field, right? That we, as the multi-network community, we will support, right? And this is where kind of we trying to standardize around. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, but because I'm checking, I'm looking into my example, and I don't have the same thing. Okay, I see. Yeah, yeah, because they. Okay, so the requests, okay, on the bottom is what you're requesting, like the very bottom. This MacVLAN ETH0 on the very bottom points to the request in the config, the one that is just above. This
Got it.
is,
So this
yeah.
is your volume. If I would look at this from the storage kind of parallels, this is your volume. This is your mount. Is that true?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, this is what you request. I mean, what you want,
I
and
understand.
then how do you
This
want
is
to
the,
configure it? Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Yeah. So there is that. Okay. So this is the name, but this is a list. So I'm confused. But all right. I
Yeah, I
assume.
mean, the did it like this because it can be any type of devices, and some specific use cases you can point to different multiple config for one device for one
Oh,
request,
I got
and
it.
one request can create multiple devices. So it's a bit complex to understand, but
Oh, yeah.
I
I see
don't
that.
fully understand everything.
But before we go there, this is a claim, right? This is one per, a claim is one per pod. Is that correct?
In our case, I would say yes because of the resource claim status that we have now.
Right.
But in reality, for any devices, no. One resource claim
Okay.
can be like
Is there
for multiple
a
devices,
template? Is that
multiple
still
pods.
exist? Does this still exist?
Yes. A template will create one resource claim for each pod requesting this.
All right. So basically we shall template. So, and I assume it will contain the spec of claim, right? In some ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Okay. So we can basically, we don't need to cut. So the question here is the template, and this is what I would think, a template replaces pod network. Is that statement work with everyone? So basically what we, is that fair or not? So that's the question, because there is, we can go very multiple ways on that. So maybe I will do this, option 1. Resource claim replaces pod network, right? So we had our pod network as a representation that staff is going to reference this. And then in option 1, we have what I'm thinking is resource claim template, or dot template, right? This is just a templated this. Replaces pod network. So that means we service references, or maybe let me do service in quotation because that might be some gateway API references the template services or network policy references the template, right? What else? Basically, if I go to my CAP, right, everything where I was saying something references pod network, I replace it with the template. That's basically what it boils down. There is a default RCT. Let me just resource claim template. So basically, this is the template that we auto-populate when you don't specify anything, just kind of backward compatibility. Keep in mind, I want to keep all the functionalities that we called out in the CAP here, so that and please call me out that we don't want to do that, because that's what I would imagine. I want to make sure that all the networking in the cluster then is done through this, right? Whether it's a additional interface or the main interface, everything goes through that. So we had the default one that basically plugs in the ETH0, right? In the same way. Am I going ahead of myself here? Please silence, please confirm thoughts on this. Because whatever options I am picking, I still want to kind of keep all the kind of capabilities that we did define in CAP. So having default network, having ability to transfer from default network, making sure that there was some restrictions on how many of them I can have per pod initially, like saying that initially I wanted to make sure that we have only one per pod of a specific pod template or network in a pod. What else do I know? Oh, referencing kind of, there was a notions of kubelet reporting readiness only when the default was ready. This is something that we can not do because that's part of the core and we cannot make that dependency. But what we can do is say our driver will never report ready status until that default network does exist, right? We can do around those lines. We can leverage the array to block the scheduler or the any kind of machinations to ensure that we have all the pieces in place before you start creating a pod. Yes, Doug.
Sorry, looking for mute. So this is maybe something that's important to identify is, yeah, so something that when we decided to become a CRD, or in this case, as we're talking about, go directly to another object like resource claim template. But something that we lost here is we were looking for this idea originally that we would change this Kubernetes core concept about networking for like what is the default network or having multiple default networks. And being able to determine, readiness on that network, I feel like is pretty important, and we may need flexibility in multi-networking to say, this is the default, I need to have readiness on this, etc. Is that something that maybe we still would want to pursue by
so readiness of a network per node, I think that was I think the, and that's fair point. Thank you for bringing that up because I missed that. So there, I think we cut that initially in the KEP to kind of simplify what we say, that whenever you have a network, it's available across all the nodes. But eventually, the kind of North Star was to have what you're saying, right? I'm not sure whether you were saying that, but I am extrapolating a bit here.
Okay.
But having what you said, ability to say that network is ready, that's one aspect, and then having additionally a per node readiness defined, right? But DRA should give us that, the last piece at least, because DRA exactly is doing that, right, through all the kind of reporting of what resources available on specific node. This is where we achieve the per node availability.
Yeah, that we can have that functionality built in, right? So we could
that one is exactly, we get that for free with DRA. Yeah, I forgot. But then readiness, to what you're saying, I'm looking at the object that Lionel kind of linked. I'm looking at the status. There is no conditions over there, or are there, Lionel?
Yes, there are, but I didn't implement it, so condition is null.
Okay, so there you go. That answers. Does that answer? I wonder, do they have like Lionel? Do they have like a hard-coded set of types, or we can do our own type? Do you know?
No, it's for now. It's free. It's
free for all.
whatever
Okay.
you want. Yeah.
So basically, this is where leverage RCT conditions. Will that satisfy that?
But maybe you want to say network readiness status or something. Just yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
No, that's fair. So and maybe maybe one more thing. What will be, because that's something that I didn't define. This is, I'm just throwing this out here. Maybe what needs to be defined is what is the struct. What is it called? Parameter struct. Do we? And that's the question right here. So basically, what is this? So it's nice to have Multus, but it's implementation specific. So I'm gonna push back on that. should we just copy this? That's the question, right?
It was Mike Brown 1 week or 2 weeks ago that was mentioning a cap where you can, from kubelet, pass this resource claim object. I haven't read the cap yet, but from what I understood is that it simplifies the way it is configured, because this resource claim is passed through CRI when the pod is created. It's, from what I understood, it's like this. But if we have another reference, then we still need to have this API call.
So let me ask you that, because, and I wonder whether it's possible, but what if, and now I'm hand waving here a bit and maybe daydreaming, what if this is our entry to the template, and now a strange thing, now we have a mutating webhook, and whenever a resource claim is being created out of that template, and we see the type is, where is it? In some ways, pod DRA networking, the driver is ours. We know that it's something that we hard coded, and we know this is ours. This is coming from multi-network community. What we would do in that mutating webhook from the template, we will capture this and we will get that object and put it in the resource claim as a text, whatever you have, right? That would work, right? The problem here is network attachment definition is a open text. So basically that's what it would be. It will copy the spec of the object and paste it into the this section. It's too crazy? Or did I lost you somewhere?
You've got me thinking about it for sure, Mache.
So let me.
So I guess a couple things here is, so I'm so glad that Lionel repeated this so that I could understand it better about this idea of having the resource claim pass through CRI. I think that that's critical. That's a critical thing here, right? And there's two sides to this. Like, I see what you're saying, Mache, and overall, I mean, in a lot of ways it makes sense, right? As we say, now switch out for the standard that you want. So now your standard is pod network, or it's this idea of this like pod network reference, right? And that webhook, it's, yeah, so that mutating webhook picks that up, figures out the data for it, and then puts it in there. So this is before the creation of the pod, right? That's what we need. And certainly at the like implementation layer, like CNI, for example, and or whatever comes next, or etc., we would get all that data at CNI at, which today this is definitely a problem in the Multis world, is we don't get all that data, so that we have to make the API call. So we move an API call into a webhook. The other thing is, the flip side is the way, like, having it all directly in the configuration, so that you don't have to have that mutating webhook and another moving part, is also kind of nice, right?
But then what is this section to be generic?
So that's where I kind of think, yeah, that's a good question.
I know this looks good. I know this.
I come from a CNI specific implementation mindset, and I mean, like, I understand some of the limitations here with
no,
CNI, but yeah.
Don't get me wrong on this one. My problem with that approach is, no, it's what you're saying. It's what you're calling out. It's a CNI specific only thing, right? And even then, when you think about this, this is not even an ad. This is not straightforward. I think this is slightly modified, right? Because this is the text of the NAT, right? So this is like the CNI exactly. This is the CNI config rather than the whatever NAT spec has, right? So there is that modification. I assume, Lionel, you had to do some changes onto the Multus to accept this.
I don't use Multus behind.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, you just used this as a CNI call. Oh, I see. Got it.
Awesome. So it's just YAML converted to the JSON for the CNI call. Yeah. I mean, here's the other thing. Could we yeah, I don't know.
And this one can have additional configuration as well. This is where, so interface name, and this is where we need to be cognizant about that aspect, right? Because this interface cannot go to a template, or can it? Can it go to a template? I think it probably could, right? Why I'm saying this is because, okay, then keeping to the structure, one interface per pod, that would work, right, in a template, because you will never have two, so there is no collision, right? But that will be the limitation, right? So that will be the question mark, whether a specific item like this can be posted into a template, right? Because we need to make sure that like node name on the deployment, right? You cannot put node name because you cannot have all the you can sorry, or in a daemon set, maybe, let's say that you cannot have node name in a daemon set, because that's kind of be the purpose of the daemon set. You should have it spread across all the nodes. If you put one name, then it's always land on one node, so it's kind of pointless. So and this is the kind of type of fields I'm questioning as well here, right? What should be the templated parameters? Can there be, do we call some of those out, right? That some of them can be only here or not there. This approach, I see one downside of this is, you see how we had pod network and we had the pod network interface. I think we call it pod network interface, right? And the interface was on a one-to-one relation, or yeah, kind of supposed to be on one-to-one. Depending on how your implementation would support this, it could be one-to-many, but it could be used as well as one-to-one to the pod, same like a resource claim. And in that point, you could specify order details, right? Because it's gonna land on only just one pod. I want this specific MAC on this interface. I want this specific IP, or even a name of the interface, right? So I can call out, because this is just an individual interface of a pod, so I can put all the data. I don't worry about multiple replications, right? So at that point, this is where definitely some of those parameters fits in, right? But I might be rambling. So, okay. I think I need to kind of step back a bit and structurize this. So what we said till now is, one of the options is using resource claim template that would replace as a reference the pod network, right? Then what would be the parameterized? So that's another kind of question of what will be the opaque structure that our group would support and want to kind of move forward with. Should that be the pod network structure or not? Then the conditions for network readiness would be handled by the conditions on the resource claim or the resource claim template. And basically, that's kind of the high level of the approach. I assume, in terms of support for service and network policy, let's maybe think about that one. If we were to go with the gateway API approach, right? We would have, let's say, currently we have what is it called? It's called routes. I think the routes probably wouldn't have to change. Probably the gateway object itself would have to change to say that I have a cluster IP that will be my let's just focus for now, for example, or to kind of since gateway IP is the thing that kind of enters the your kind of it's the entrance to multiplication to your routes where you want to go from that gateway, right? In our case, when it's L3 or L4, you cannot differentiate on many aspects, but here you have one IP that then based on some additional logic can split into multiple. But the base case where we have one IP going to the specific backend, so our cluster IP service, gateway can be the one that would hold, for example, the cluster IP. And this is what will be having the reference to this, to the resource claim template, right? So basically that would mean that the cluster IP has to be from a service side range that belongs to that specific network. That's one aspect. And then the other aspect that will dictate which endpoints of the specific pods I select, right? If I have a multi-homed pod, I know that for this route, I have to pick up the other interfaces, right? So that way, that's how kind of the path would look like. And then what I'm getting at is the gateway will reference the resource claim template. Question mark, because I think that there has to be additional conditions. A resource claim template, that of which has the driver multi-network community, right? Let's call it. I'll just be very blunt here. Let's say multi-network community. Let's call it like that, right? Sorry, my multi dot. I need somewhere a dot. Network. Oh my gosh. Okay, my typing. Sorry. What do you think? Because keep in mind that if I can point to any, I can point to any others, but that will mean that gateway API or any other object that we support has to point to a resource claim template that is of a specific of our driver, right? That will be the additional condition for this. So that's kind of the UX. It's kind of shaky because I can point to some other. Then our controllers would say, oh, you're pointing to a resource claim that's not of our driver. We will not do it. It's kind of the gateway is false, right? So the readiness for the gateway will be not ready. So we have a means to kind of work around that. But what do you think? This is the option one we keep talking about, right? That would do that, and that will be the. Any thoughts?
But isn't it what's it called driver the same as what's it called before? Implement provider.
So yeah, or that, right? How would we distinguish our I mean multi-network community drivers versus, I don't know, a GPU claim? How we are distinguishing those?
What I mean is that before in pod network we could have I don't know, Jiki has a provider, right? And then we can have a
No,
CNI.
no, I understand. I understand. I know what you're calling out, Lionel. But how do I distinguish what I mean this group's claims versus the other ones? Because we have to make sure that someone's going to create a resource claim template called default, but it will be used some NVIDIA pointing to some NVIDIA driver. What's that? Why should I not pick that one as my default claim to use for pod networking? Right? So there needs to be some identifier, unless there is some other field you can tell us, and maybe I'm not familiar with, that would call that out for us. And why I'm saying this is, as I mentioned before, what if we were to push this whole spec into the parameters? This is where it would go. This is where that would go then, right? And this is where your provider will still be there, but it will be in the parameters section.
Yeah, I think this. I mean, DR is complex to use, to be honest. Yeah. And if we add this layer on top of it, it would be even more complex because we would have this driver multi-network community, and then we have to have a provider that points to something else, and it's very hard to use.
So I assume what we could do is something like this. Then it will be Multus dot multi-network community. We could go that way, right? And then will be, or let's say Cilium dot multi-network community. We can do that. I think that would work as well, right? I think that won't break it, right?
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. If it's if it's updated, of course.
Because that can be the solution as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I agree, that will be an unnecessary level of complexity, but then with our driver, then we would do something like this, right? So then we control of who can be part of us, who do we understand, and who do we support. Are you compliant with the multi-network community stuff? Then you are kind of recognized. I think that's kind of annoying that there will be some authority, meaning this group, to say who can or cannot. That kind of tricky always, having such a power. But then, yeah, or we just go blind and we always, if you have the ending string matches this, then yes, we can accept you and whatever, and you just need to be compliant too.
Maciej, just to add, I'm not so knowledgeable on the DRA, but it seems they refer the resource claim template to a resource class, and in the resource class they have the driver name.
Mm.
So
And that's
they know.
the same. Isn't that the same? Won't that be the same?
Yeah, it should. So this driver, whatever it's the value on that, should be similar to the driver controller that will be used.
No, the driver class, the driver name in the device class is not required. It is required if you have opaque parameters in the device class, I think.
Okay, so that's something we need to maybe dig into deeper. Maybe there's some other fields we can leverage, but I think the general idea, this could work, right? Then that will be, because we need to have a identifier for things that are for this multi-network community, right? We will, let's say we are going to have a controller that will identify what is the default network, and basically we would want to have as well a let's say a validating webhook saying that you can have only one. You should not have two default networks, maybe the resource claim templates named default, that will be of this community, right? This ending, this domain, in this domain, the multi-network community, you shall have only one at the given time in a cluster, right? And then there will be a webhook in our controller that will kind of enforce that in some ways. Any thoughts?
I have only one question. Must say that that in DRA that there is this device class. So technically this is more likely taking this from the roles and responsibilities point of view. So for example, the device class is created by the cluster admin, and it will be used with this resource claim template or with this resource claim object with the reference. So in this case, but if you specify, for example, the IP address or any details which is related to the interface itself, which is related to the MacVLAN interface itself, this is more likely a little bit makes this roles and responsibility separation difficult, my view.
So keep in mind, I'm assuming the claim is created out of the template. So let's not take it by word, because I don't have example of. So let's imagine this is a what I want to do. Let's call it a template, and then this is my whatever. This one has a template. It's like, I think it's usually like this, right? So let's assume it's like that. I don't say, and if there is a class here or something, maybe then we can use that one, right? Is that what you're saying? There is a class name here on this level?
What I would like to do is more likely specify this MacVLAN interface related parameters in a device class or in another object, and only using the reference here, not more likely putting any parameters for specifying the interface itself, because
right. So I think what this is where we were talking about here, the parameters, right? I think what we called out here was to do this. And that's a question to what we want to do around that one, but like that, like right. So what we called out in the main object, right? It goes here. No, let me quickly fix this. Like that. And then your reference is still here, and that's in the template, right? And then the question is, do we do the mutating webhook to get that or not, right? The interface, I don't know whether the interface could be here or not. Let me maybe do this in cursive, or maybe not cursive. Let me out S. Oh, so we have it, but it's not here. And then I think interface would fly away as well, because that should be part of maybe the here of the network attachments or whatever
yes.
it is.
Yeah.
So I think that's the most kind of straightforward approach we could do. I'm not sure whether that's applicable. And I hear you, or Doc left, on the allude to having, what I want to say, a straight up all the data, right? And then getting rid of this approach, right? Because this is, it's not maybe the worst, to be honest. It will, so the mutating webhook will be in the path of creating a pod. That's a thing, right? Because I'm creating a pod. I see I'm pointing out to the template. The template has to be created, and the creation of then the claim out of the template would get webhooked, right? So that will slow down a bit the scheduling of a single pod to kind of translate. And then each time I am scheduling a pod, I have to do an API call. I have to do an API call to retrieve this guy, whatever this is, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of tricky. So that's the question, whether are we okay with that or not, because that's the consequences of having the where is it here, having the parameters in this object. But I think to be most generic and enable any other implementations, I think that's kind of the only way to do anyway. Any other comments? Lionel, I think, what do you think about this one? Because you did the POC, that was kind of what you did, was very easy. Well, how do you see this being going like that?
Yeah, I need to think more about it.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
So then the other aspect of like this flag enable, right? And this is something to the readiness, and to remind you that the enabled flag was responsible to ensure that it was just a user specified user-facing ability to disable a specific network, right? To ensure that no new pods can be assigned to this network for whatever reason, an administrative disable, right? So basically what this would mean is someone sets this to false, our controller, because it will understand this, it will see that this is our stuff, it will just change the condition of that object to false, right? And that would mean the rest of the flow would be blocked because it's the resource claim template is false, right? I think I'm hoping that's how they treat the readiness. That's something that we need to figure out with DRA though. I assume they don't look into that.
I don't think we can update the config.
The template, you cannot update the template. Is that what you call out?
template, I don't know, but the resource claim itself, I don't think you can.
Is immutable?
I think so, but I need to double check.
Okay, all right, yeah, that's so. But on a claim, that's not something that we would care much about, because this is per, let's say this is per interface, the claim itself. So I agree with you. We wouldn't need that one there. We would need only on a template to be able to globally disable a specific network. So that's yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was thinking the way to disable it otherwise is to remove it from the resource slice. So the pod will never be able to be scheduled because there is be no like, and this will be per node, okay? Because if you remove like the ability to create this kind of MacVLAN device on every node, then yeah, you have this enable true or false already.
Right, that's
already
what
there.
you need a global. Then what you're saying, there is an ability to, on a DRA level, you can tweak it on a per node level.
Yeah, if you, I mean, you need to implement it still if you
okay.
if you do some trick with the resource slice, but I think yes.
Oh, okay, I see. So this is where the additional functionality we would have to handle as this community. And this is what I'm calling out like our controllers, right? One of the controllers will be making sure this and handling the readiness of this field, right? The other thing would be to integrate with the DRA, I assume the slices, which then contribute towards the scheduler. Lionel, is that what you call out?
Yeah, exactly, yes.
All right, and that's very good, because then what we can do, we can provide a very bare bone reference implementation that will rely only on the number of IPs available and provided, right? Let's say, and it will be only based on that. But there can be cases where you want to further limit that based on some other aspects. I don't know. I have only 10 VFs that I can create out of this, or some other restrictions. And this is where you would be able to maybe add to that controller. Maybe we can make it somehow pluggable, or you just create your own and replace it with whatever you have. Just ensure that whatever resource you are expecting for the specific network name, that's what you provide, right? I think, yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah. Thoughts on this one? I think option one is kind of one of the, I think, the most cleanest, because I think what we talked about before, and let me call out that option two, I think was to keep pod network as a CRD. And then the claim references the pod network. So we create another level of introduction, but then pod network is the pod network becomes that object that we reference, right, everywhere else. But we have this additional level of indirection. So basically, what it means is we have resource claim pointing to a pod network, and that can point to custom params, right? And then basically what it means is the mutating webhook can still be used to maybe collapse those two things, and basically then eventually in a claim, let me see, still use the mutating webhook juke into the resource claim. I'm not sure what that gives us. I think a cleaner reference to the network itself, more obvious. Then here we reference a clean to a network. That's an advantage, right? Because the third-party stuff that we would use, then they point to a to a network, right? So this is what yeah, that's the approach. Pooja, go ahead.
Oh, so just quickly, so does that mean, so I think now pod network, since it's a CR, it would have its own status. Would that determine kind of like the readiness question that
Yeah.
we were saying, and then the resource?
Yeah,
name
that's a fair
template?
point. Pod networks takes over status. Yeah. So basically, then pod network is becoming what it was in the CAP, right? If you read through the CAP, what it defines for pod network, it still is there. It's just now not a core object. It's now a CRD, right? So the problem is this, I assume. This is the big disadvantage. Multiple in the redirection, indirections, or what's not. So basically, the I would for the sake of visibility, I will do this. So what happens is we have spec, class name, template devices, parameters, and then here is we just call out a, let's say, pod network name. And then this is that. No list, we don't need list. And then I think here we can just have a name because we know what the type it is. So we don't have to have like a type. This is being taken over. So this is that, right? Let's probably, so then we don't need that, right? We can say this default like this. So that's the level of indirection we are getting, right? The opaque part is just pod network name. The driver stays the same, right? Or even the driver doesn't have to be there then, because what happens is the implementation is then defined inside the pod network, right? Sorry, here. So the provider is here, and the reference to a specific parameters is there as well. So what it ends up being is this is not, you don't have to multi-class this, right? Here at this level. So this is one driver, our multi-network community points to a pod network, and then from there, your driver steps in and does its stuff, right? So we just point through the template to the CRD of a pod network, and then we deal with that from there. I think that's option 2. That's kind of I think this is something that we were talking back in when back in I think May or June, when we were saying, oh, okay, so let's maybe DRA will mean we will have an additional indirections, right? I think that's what it meant. The question is, can we go ahead and just use the template for that, and that can replace the pod network, or just keep clean and have a straightforward pod network CRD that represents that? That's, I think, the trade-off. Pooja?
And so does this mean that there is no mutating webhook involved in that option too? Or is it
No,
still a webhook that will inject the pod network?
No, I think this is what I'm saying here, right? Still use the webhook to collapse all the objects, right? Because we can still do that, right? It will be just double call. First, it calls for the pod network, and then it calls for the parameters inside of them. And then it collapses all the stuff into a struct into here, right? I think that would be, I would imagine that will be the resulting thing, right? And then you know that we understand this piece up to that point, and then whatever is listed over here, this is where the provider would understand what's inside here, right? In the list of the parameters, right?
Mashay, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. So with the option 2, the checks of the OPAC configuration will be done twice, meaning kubelet will do it with the array, and we need to do as well with the CRD, or did I miss that part?
Why you have to check it twice or pull it twice? What do you mean? What do you have in mind, Mohsin? I might be.
No, it was more that part of the DRI driver. It's actually to help out with the checks and validation and so forth. But then, yeah.
I think that's still there because pod network is basically named in a specific way. I think what we'll have to enforce as well is the name, since this is a non-namespaced object. So I would say this has to be still valid and this has to be named default.
Okay.
Right. So that's one aspect, right? Default equals this, right? I think one of our controllers would, if you'd say driver of ours, this needs to be equal one to the other so that they are kind of aligned. But then I think in terms of checks, yes, we will check this object then and the CRD as well, right? The controller will have to do both. But the control is on the pod network. But I think what you're saying, we have to have a synchronization, like for example, the readiness condition, right? This will have to be synchronized to this guy as well then, right? But that's where the controller will go in, and I think this will be part of the general common stuff that we will build, right? So I don't think that's a bigger deal, but yeah, it had to be there. In terms of validation, I don't know.
I pasted, but we can discuss later on. They also have a cap additionally to the status that Lionel was working to add the health status, which is similar to the conditions because it has the conditions. I haven't read all the details, but that was one of the requests. So
keep in mind, this is for the template. So whatever Lionel is doing is for the specific single claim. But yeah, all right.
Yeah,
I think, folks, I will stop it here. Most folks left. We are past 9. Let's continue discussion next week. Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, folks. This was really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you as well.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.